destruction.
All right, good evening, everybody. Please, may I have your attention? I love having a microphone. All right, good evening. My name is Lukhanya Khalad. I have been asked to be with you tonight and to direct the program for the 4th annual Social Justice Lecture. Now, I'm sure many of you know that we've got a very special guest with us tonight who's going to deliver this all-important lecture. The time will come when I will formally introduce him to all of you. I just want to start off by saying what a beautiful vision it is to stand up here and to see so many beautiful faces, so many different generations, so many different races. And I think something that our guest will confirm once he sees what I'm seeing is just how this room at this very particular moment captures what we're here for today. It speaks to the preamble of our Constitution, but also the document upon which that Constitution is based, which is the Freedom Charter, which says that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. And I think you guys tonight actually represent that. Thank you so much for that. House rules first, for anybody that needs to use the facilities tonight. Please, when you go outside, there's someone from the department that will be stationed just outside the door, and they'll then be able to direct you to either the ladies or to the gents. Yeah. For those of you that do want to tweet, you are more than welcome to do so. Please do tag the university, and I'm going to give you now. So obviously the hashtag is Social Justice Lecture. And just allow for a few minutes. And then the Twitter account is at CFSJ_Mplan. At CFSJ_Mplan, for those of you that live on the Twitter streets. All right. To get tonight started, we are going to start it off by giving a rendition of South Africa's national anthem, and then to be followed immediately thereafter by the reading of the preamble of the Constitution by Shanae Jansen. Thank you so much. Please, would you stand? Thank you so much. You may be seated. Could we have Shanae Jansen, who is a candidate attorney from Kluwer Makotter Incorporated. Thank you.
Hi. I hope you guys can hear me. I'm on the shorter side of life. I will invite you guys to join me as we recite the preamble. It is on the back side of the pamphlet that was handed to you. And if you guys don't mind, I would ask for you to stand as we say our preamble. Thank you. Okay. Is everyone ready? Okay. I will now begin. We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land, respect those who have worked to build and develop our country, and believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. We, therefore, to our freely elected representatives, adopt this constitution as the prime law of the Republic so as to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. Lay the foundations for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people and every citizen is equally protected by law. Improve the quality of all citizens and free the potential of each person, and build a united and democratic South Africa able to take its rightful place as a sovereign state in the family of nations. May God protect our people. Nkosi sikeleli Afrika. Morena Boluka Sichaba Saesu. God seën South Africa. God bless South Africa. Muzimu Fatsesetu Africa. Hosi Katekisisa Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Shanae Jansen for leading us through the preamble of the Constitution. Of course, Shanae is a candidate attorney from Kluwer Makotter Incorporated. Now, unfortunately, because of time, tonight I'm not going to tell any jokes, not that I know any, but also we want to try and stay with the program as best as we possibly can. So next up on our program, I would love to call the Acting Dean of the Faculty of Law here at Stellenbosch University, Professor Juanita Pinar. Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. As you know, I'm the Acting Dean, and tonight it is my privilege to officially welcome you to our annual Social Justice Lecture. I would like to, in particular, welcome our honoured guests, our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Wim de Villiers, Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Professor Teresh Ramjuganath, Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Professor Sibusiso Moyo, our Registrar, Ronel Retief, Dr. Ronel Retief, our Swedish Ambassador, Ambassador Hakan Joholt, and then also we have the youngest Chief of the Royal Bafokeng here tonight, Dr. Koketso Rakudu, Minister Sharna Fernandez, Department of Social Development, Western Cape Government, and then also representatives of our law trustees, Michiel Roux and Chris Otto, and Stellenbosch Mayor's representative, Councillor Patricia Crawley, and then, of course, also Kluwer Makotter directors. We also received apologies from businesswoman and co-chair of the Council of Social Justice Champions, Basitsana Kumala, who is joining us online. A warm welcome, a word of welcome to our students and faculty staff, as well as staff members and representatives from our sister faculties of law and also other faculties here. I saw our data expert as I entered, Kanchu there at the back. Welcome also data analyst, and of course all the friends of our faculty. But the man of the hour is of course Justice Albie Sachs. A special word of welcome to Justice Sachs and his wife Vanessa. What a wonderful occasion to have you in our midst, to address us on a topic that we are increasingly grappling with. Is this the country that was fought for? And Justice Sachs did fight for our country and has the scars to reflect that struggle. Having regard of his background and struggle credentials and being a judge in the aftermath of apartheid, I was struck by the following passage in a wonderful book that I have just finished reading, The Theory of Flight by Siphiwe Gloria Ndlovu. I might just add, I had to read it with a flashlight, but just leave it at that. And here with the quote, people believed that because of his job, he did not understand the beauty of gentleness, of patience, of calm. But he has long known that in order to do a job well, you need to take time to be patient, to be calm, to have clear objectives, to know exactly what it is that you want to achieve, to have a clear course of action. Whatever job you do it with finesse and precision. And so many wonderful judgments were penned with finesse and precision, a sublime combination in judgment writing by Justice Sachs, with a very well-known decision of PU municipality versus various occupiers being one of my personal favorites. Justice Sachs, welcome. We are looking forward to your address.
Prof. Juanita Pinar, who's of course the acting dean of the Faculty of Law, thank you so very much for welcoming us, and I'm sure that the Justice and his lovely wife Vanessa, they feel very welcome. Now let's get to the opening address, which will be delivered to us by the Rector as well as the Vice Chancellor of Stellenbosch University, Professor Wim de Villiers.
Thank you very much. What a beautiful sight. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I say this is a beautiful sight. I must say last night I was also treated to a beautiful sight at a Varsity Cup game in the Darnie Craven Stadium. Full to the brim, 16,000, and we managed to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat there. So our old rivals, University of Cape Town, so we showed them a thing or two. So yesterday, the 20th of February, marked 14 years since we began celebrating World Day of Social Justice. So it is quite fitting that we are able to reflect on the progress we have made and are making as a society in this quest. So every year on World Day of Social Justice, we are reminded of the need to promote efforts to tackle issues such as poverty, exclusion, unemployment, gender equity, social well-being, and justice for all. Now, this requires consistent and conscious, relentless effort daily to tackle these challenges and to ultimately effect positive change. We uphold the principles of social justice when we promote gender equality on the rights of indigenous peoples and migrants. We advance social justice when we remove barriers that people face because of gender, age, race, ethnicity, religion, culture, or disability. In South Africa, the gap to ensure that everyone has access to basic human rights is ever widening, a consequence of the gross inequality and aggravated by the current economic crisis, as well as what I call the four horsemen of the apocalypse: unemployment, poverty, crime, and corruption. Needless to say, this requires our full and immediate attention. It is thus a huge honor for me to say welcome to someone that is not only an advocate and champion for social justice, but who has made profound sacrifices in our struggle for justice for all. Judge Albie Sachs, our keynote speaker tonight, made us aware in 1992 that two themes run through the Constitution of South Africa. They are never again and at the very least. In his book, Advancing Human Rights in South Africa, Judge Sachs writes, "Never again will people be humiliated and insulted on the grounds of race. Never again will there be forced removals, pass laws, group areas, and job reservation. And at the very least, everyone should have a decent home, electricity, water, schooling, medical attention, and social security." So I believe there's a role we all can play regarding tackling these issues, and that is by sharing our skills, sharing our talents, and sharing our abilities with a focus of being in service to society. At Stellenbosch University, we are committed to help shaping a society where social justice is the cornerstone of our very existence. And as part of this endeavor, the Stellenbosch University Center for Social Justice with Professor Thuli Madonsela as its inaugural director was established. And the mission of the Center for Social Justice is to promote, and I quote, social justice scholarship and consciousness, as well as public policy design skills and collaboration in both academia and society. And the Center for Social Justice and its mission form part of Stellenbosch University's pursuit of our 2018 centenary restitution statement, which reads as follows. Stellenbosch University acknowledges its inextricable connection with generations past, present, and future. Stellenbosch University celebrates its many successes and achievements. But Stellenbosch University simultaneously acknowledges its contribution towards the injustices of the past. And for this, we have deep regret. We apologize unreservedly to the communities and individuals who were excluded from the historical privileges that Stellenbosch University enjoyed, and we honor the critical mighty voices of the time who would not be silenced. In responsibility towards the present and future generations, Stellenbosch University commits itself unconditionally to the ideal of an inclusive, world-class university in and for Africa. I thank all of you, our stakeholders, and our special guests for being here this evening. We appreciate your support to this university and to Professor Madonsela and her team in their quest to accelerate the pace of responding to the constitutional call to establish a peaceful society based on social justice and where every citizen's life is improved and everyone's potential freed. And from the sublime to the more mundane, or should I say from the cerebral, I'm a gastroenterologist, so from the cerebral to the intestinal, I would also like to express gratitude for the partnership we have with Kluwer Makotter, who have graciously contributed to the refreshments of this evening's event. So I wish you all a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Professor, thank you so much for those wise words and opening address. All right, so I was asked to introduce our special guest for tonight. What I am going to read is not even a quarter, not even a iota of who and what our special guest is and what he's meant for us, not just me as a young boy that comes from Craddock, but I think for us as a country. So allow me to just quickly introduce Justice Albie Sachs. Now, on turning 6 during the World War II, Albie Sachs received a card from his father expressing the wish that he would grow up to be a soldier in the fight for liberation. His career in human rights activism started at the age of 17, when, as a second-year law student at the University of Cape Town, this would have been in 1952, he took part in the Defiance of Unjust Laws campaign. 3 years later, in 1955, he attended the Congress of the People at Kliptown, where, of course, the Freedom Charter was adopted. He started practice as an advocate at the Cape Bar, aged just 21 years old. The bulk of his work involved defending people charged under racist statutes and repressive security laws. Now, many faced the death sentence. He himself was raided by security police, subjected to banning orders, restricting his movement, and eventually placed in solitary confinement without trial for 2 prolonged spells of detention. In 1966, Albie Sachs went into exile. After spending 11 years studying and teaching law in England, he worked for a further 11 years in Mozambique as a law professor and legal researcher. In 1988, he was blown up by a bomb placed in his car while in Maputo by agents of South African security forces. In that incident, he lost an arm as well as the sight in one eye. None deterred, though. During the 1980s, he worked closely with Oliver Tambo, the then leader of the African National Congress, in exile. He helped draft the organization's code of conduct as well as its statutes. Now, after recovering from the explosion, he devoted himself full-time to preparations for a new democratic constitution for South Africa. In 1990, he returned home and, as a member of the Constitutional Committee and the National Executive of the African National Congress, he took an active part in the negotiations which led to South Africa becoming what it is today, a constitutional democracy. Now, after the first democratic elections in 1994, he was appointed by former President Nelson Mandela to serve on the newly established Constitutional Court. Now, in addition to his work on the court, he's traveled to many countries, sharing the South African experience and healing divided societies. He's also been engaged in the sphere of art and architecture and played an active role in the development of the Constitutional Court building and its art collection on the site of the Old Fort Prison in Johannesburg. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to please stand as we ask Albie Sachs to come forward.
Some people remember their first kiss. I remember the first time I went to jail. I was 17, a second-year law student. I'd finished my second-year exams. We timed it. December 1952. And I'm leading a group of 3 students from UCT and 1 white worker from England into the General Post Office to sit on a seat marked non-whites only. I look at pictures of myself then and I'm astonished. This young guy wearing a tie, which is very unusual, and huge police to arrest us, and he's shouting, "My boy, yeah!" And the audience respond, "Yeah, Africa! Africa, my boy!" Where did I get that courage? Age 17, I don't know. That's the beginning of the story I'm going to tell in relation to a question that's put to me day in and day out, anywhere in the world. Albie, you sacrificed so much. Is this the country you were fighting for? And my answer, which seems to come as a total surprise to everybody, and I guess will surprise most of you in this room, is yes. This is the country I was fighting for. Is the guy mad? Look at South Africa. The lights are on. Who knows when they'll be off? So many problems. The crime, the gender-based violence, the corruption, dysfunctional municipalities all over the country. You get a mark if you're functional. Unemployment, inequality. And I'm saying this is the country we're fighting for. People might think there's a little bit of the shrapnel from the bomb lodged in my head. Is this guy nuts? So let me finish my sentence. Yes, this is the country we were fighting for, but no, it's not the society we're fighting for. And it's important to make that distinction. And not to diss and undermine not only the gains we've made, but the mechanisms we need to deal with all those problems I've mentioned. I'm speaking now not as a theoretician. I'm speaking as Albie, who went through so many different things at different stages. And it's not only that I believe we must make the distinction between the country and the society, but I believe, and I'm optimistic, that we have the country that can deal with the problems of the society. And that's an optimism based not simply on fantasy or wishful thinking, but on my life experience. And that experience starts with the 17-year-old saying, Africa, my boy, Africa, in front of the cops and being hauled off to prison. I might say that episode didn't have a glorious ending for me. I come back to court. I'm in court, and the magistrate sees 17-year-old, he's a juvenile. Is one of your parents in court? My mother stands up. He says, I'm sending you home to your mother. And I wanted to be the revolutionary leader, and I'm sent home to my mother. That's 1952. Fast forward to 1955. And we had to come up from Cape Town to Kliptown to attend the Congress of the People, the Freedom Charter. Those who came by road were stopped. I came by train. I got through. I was there. And what an amazing experience it was. Sitting on the hard, cold, then Transvaal earth with makeshift wooden platform in front for 2 days, and accepting by acclamation the preamble to the Freedom Charter and the 10 clauses of the Freedom Charter. And this was a document not produced by lawyers. I'm not anti-lawyer, I'm a lawyer. But this was produced as a result of canvassing people throughout the country. What are your pains? What do you want? What do you envisage for a new, free, democratic South Africa? And we got, I remember, brown paper bag would be used with big handwriting, or the local school teacher from all over the country. And that was crucial to the Freedom Charter. It was not designed by lawyers or in a studio or classroom. It came from the demands, which were then collected together and very poetically rendered into what we call the Freedom Charter today, 1955. The police came in on horseback, automatic weapons, one stone. And we wouldn't be speaking about Sharpeville, we'd be speaking about the Kliptown massacre, but we stood up and we sang because we had a vision of a future South Africa, and the vision was a vision coming from the people, from the oppressed, expressing their gleam about a future that we wanted. Fast forward, long way forward, 1988. A seminar room in University of Zambia, about 100 of us. And we are adopting constitutional guidelines for a new South Africa. And Zambian troops on standby in case commandos come in to take us out. We were always waiting for the helicopter to land the commandos. And we have delegates from ANC representations all over the world, maybe a few from the underground, from the military, diplomatic people, and we're discussing now our vision of a new South Africa. And I'm on the Constitutional Committee created by Oliver Tambo in 1985. At the time of saying, make South Africa ungovernable, apartheid unworkable, he wants to be ready. When the time comes to negotiate, we must be ready. And he had a vision and a plan. And I'm going to throw out a question to you. If you had to single out one individual in South Africa as, if you like, the original author of the basic concepts of our Constitution, who would that be? I've got a book as a prize to anybody who can get it. Anybody? Not me. Not me by any means. Not Oliver Tambo, but that's close. Not Thabo Mbeki. Not Steve Biko. They all played a role. Not Nelson Mandela. Not Albert Lutuli, they all played a role. I'm going to give you the initials, PJ, and not PJ Powers. Paulo Jordan. Paulo Jordan, not even a lawyer, the cheek of it. And he was commissioned by Oliver Tambo. He was head of research in the ANC. We're getting constitutional documents from all over the world. Weird documents, all designed to ensure the whites don't lose anything, but disguised. There'll be votes for everybody, but nothing can change. Weird documents. What's the ANC's answer? And Paulo Jordan does research, and he says we've got to prepare for one person, one vote. They're going to try and entrench existing privileges, and our answer is a Bill of Rights. We had a Bill of Rights in 1923 in the ANC. First time, as long ago as that. We had a Bill of Rights in 1944 during World War II, when Churchill and Roosevelt proclaimed the Atlantic Charter for a post-Hitler world. And people in South Africa, black people, say, what about us? African claims. It included a Bill of Rights. The Freedom Charter in 1955, that's our answer. And he said the entrenched protection of white minority privilege will come in the form of group rights, so that our new constitutional order will be based upon whites representing whites, having their own president, Afrikaners, Afrikaners, Zulus, Zulus, and they will rule by consensus. It was called consociational democracy. And he said our answer is a Bill of Rights that protects people not because they're black, not because they're white, not because they're brown, not because they're majority, not because they're minority, because they're human beings. And that's got to go with Majority rule in a united South Africa. No Bantustans. One country, South Africa. One person, one vote, on a common voters' roll. Majority rule, but majority rule subject to fundamental rights. The majority can't take away the fundamental rights of anybody, even if they're in the majority. Palo Jordan, 1985, end of 1985. And that became the foundation of our vision, and we took it all the way through over those years, and to Kempton Park, it was strongly resisted. We were going to have 3 presidents, can you imagine? It would have been Mandela on Monday, de Klerk on Tuesday, and Buthelezi on Wednesday. I'm lying, it would have been 6 months, 6 months, 6 months each. And they would rule by consensus, which would give them a veto power over any substantial change. And our answer was non-racial democracy, united South Africa. And the breakdown that came eventually, it was triggered by Boipatong. But really it was a breakdown over 2 completely different visions. And we couldn't agree on that. And Boipatong, lack of faith, credit on the part of the regime, ANC withdraws, and then rolling mass action. Hundreds of thousands of people going through the streets of Durban and Johannesburg and Cape Town and PE, organized, strong. It was mass action in the Defiance campaign. The masses represented at the Congress of the People. Mass action now when we couldn't get agreement around the table. And the split inside the National Party ends up with Rolf Meyer and the more forward-looking people saying, we've got to have a united South Africa. We can't have this group rights thing anymore. And then we could move forward. That aspect is so important to current evaluations of what's going on in this country and the source of our malaise and difficulties. Once we had broken through, we could then move forward to how to get the Constitution. And the original clash had been on group rights versus fundamental rights for everybody, Bill of Rights in a united country. And who would make the Constitution? Would we draft it at Kempton Park at a time when the regime was in power, was strong, controlled the military, everything? It would be on their terms. Or would it be done by a democratically elected, we call it Constituent Assembly? And on the Constitutional Committee, in exile, we said to our comrades, we can't draft a constitution. We shouldn't draft a constitution. Only the people of South Africa can draft a constitution through their democratically elected representatives on South African soil. We can come up with guidelines, with principles, but as a matter of foundational principles, only a democratically elected Constituent Assembly can draft a constitution in South Africa. We insisted on that. And we got that. And we got that through rolling mass action. And when Chris Hani was assassinated and the country almost exploded, the one thing that held our country together wasn't simply Mandela saying, please, don't allow these provocateurs to destroy the democracy we want, the date for the elections. And so elections in South Africa have been central to the creation of South Africa. When I speak about our country, I speak about that moment when our constitution was made, not by lawyers in a smoke-filled or smoke-empty room, 20 million people voting for the first time. You can't have more participation than that. And I contrast that to what was happening elsewhere on the continent. In Zimbabwe, it was Lancaster House, the British lawyers getting together, wanting to withdraw, wanting to get peace, crafting a constitution that ZANU hated, ZAPU hated, and the whites hated. It had no relevance to the country. It had clauses for 10 years. After the 10 years, it was torn up. And in the former French colonies, constitutions drafted in Paris with sections of the elite. The flag, French flag, came down. Côte d'Ivoire flag went up. Whatever country it might have been, Nigerian flag came down. Sorry, the British flag, Nigeria. New anthem. Dignitaries are there and applauding. There wasn't much TV in those days, but it'd be heard on the radio, celebrations, but remote from the people. Remote from the people. They're not involved. The Constitution, in that sense, had no entrenchment in the lives, the imaginations, the culture, the spirit of the people. And in South Africa, we had, I remember when I used to travel doing anti-apartheid work, and I was just thinking about our North America, South America, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, all over Africa, Asia, talking. So many of us were doing that. And when I said apartheid is unsustainable, it's unjust, it can't last, right on. And when I said one day we're going to have a non-racial, united democratic South Africa, dead silence. Is this guy mad? After 300 years of dispossession, conquest, harsh treatment to the majority, official racism in every way, the franchise reserved for whites only, almost 90% of the land reserved for whites only. You're going to say people can live together as equals? Are you serious? And I believed, and not just I believed, our leadership believed, as a movement we believed it was possible. And it wasn't possible only because of the beliefs of the leadership. Historically, the impact of capitalism in South Africa after the gold and diamond mines came, industrialization followed. It drew us all into one country, whether we liked it or not. There was a system of communications that reached throughout the whole country. We knew we could do underground work anywhere in the country, but the police knew they could catch us within hours anywhere in the country. It was one country, a common society, very unequal, but we were all interdependent whether we liked it or not. The migrant labor system, destroying rural economies, deliberately destroying them, getting people to come from the different parts to work in the towns, sharing experiences. ANC formed in 1912 to bring together all the African communities suffering common forms of oppression deep into Africa. That's an objective fact, the economy. It's still an objective fact, the economy. We're still interdependent whether we like it or not, it's still there. But we had a second thing that the rest of Africa didn't have. We had democracy in South Africa for the whites. It's weird. We had elections, secret ballot. We had a press that criticized the government. We had a judiciary that had a modicum of independence. The language of democracy is being used all the time for mainly the Brits fighting the Boers. It meant the institutions of democracy were implanted in South Africa. They were known, they were visible. And then the struggle became to take the weapons of exclusion, the vote, for the minority, and to turn it into a weapon of inclusion. You live by the sword of minority voting rights, you die by the sword of majority voting rights. So we used to say, freedom in our lifetime, freedom, freedom, freedom. And in those days, one man, one vote. one person, one vote. We didn't want independence. South Africa was an independent country. We wanted to break down the internal colonialism. When the British handed over power in 1910, they handed over power to the whites. African people excluded from sovereignty. So to become part of the sovereignty, it meant the franchise, and it also meant something about the land and the dispossession. These were uppermost in our minds at the time. So this meant then democracy in South Africa became a weapon of liberation. And fighting for the Constitution was the equivalent of our fighting for independence. And you think of our slogans weren't independence or death, independencia or morte. It wasn't that. Our slogans were, Mabuya Africa, come back Africa. Our slogans were, freedom in our lifetime in South Africa. Our slogans were, Amandla Ngowetu, power to the people, Matla Kiarona. Not independence, but fighting in South Africa. It meant the fight over the Constitution then became the equivalent of our fight for independence. And the change wasn't simply a flag going up and down and a new country being in the United Nations. We were in the United Nations. South Africa was a founder member of the United Nations. The whites delegates were chucked out because they didn't represent the whole people. Empty seats were there for a long, long time. Now South Africa could come back as South Africa. Now we had a country. And that's why, for me, the key moment in our progress to liberation in South Africa, the first major step of self-determination for the majority was April the 27th, 1994, and it was participation of millions. The second stage then was the new parliament. Now, not negotiators round the table, self-appointed at Kempton Park, elected representatives of the people, meeting in Cape Town, in Parliament. Poor Parliament. Let it rise from the ashes. Crafting the new constitution. And the agreement was it would be in line with certain core principles that would protect minorities, majorities, individuals. And we accepted those principles, not as a concession. That's the country we wanted. We wanted a democratic country. We wanted a country that respected the rights of everybody. We wanted a country where people could follow their faiths and use their languages and feel free. We wanted all those things, so we put them in the principles. We wanted to acknowledge customary law. We wanted a dignified place for traditional leaders without exercising power, but being honored as part and parcel of the cultural patrimony of the country and very meaningful to many. We wanted all those things, and all those things were. We wanted a separation of powers. We wanted national government, provincial government, local government. All of these things were agreed to in the principles. And there was nothing in the principles that said thou shalt not have land reform. There was nothing in the principles that said thou shalt not have affirmative action or redress. The principles were completely open on all that. And we wanted to shift then the finalization of the Constitution to Parliament in Cape Town. And one of our big victories was having an electoral system that would ensure that everybody would be there. We wanted the generals who'd been trying to kill us to be in Parliament. Better in Parliament than with their guns outside, waiting for their moment to fight back, planning forms of civil war. We wanted them there. To this day, it gives me a kick, a pleasure to see, I'm not going to mention the names, but one leader of one political party has his hair over his forehead to make him look a little less bald than he might otherwise, speaking with passion, with commitment, and he had been fighting us, physically trying to kill us before. It's great that he's there in Parliament. But more important than that, the great majority of the representatives had been in the struggle. They'd been in prison, they'd been on Robben Island, they'd been in the underground, they'd been in exile. They didn't want these things to happen again. They wanted a constitution. Why have we got the most progressive constitution in the world? It's not because we have the most progressive lawyers in the world. It's because that constitution constituted us as a nation and was drafted by people who had fought for their liberty. We had a powerful women's movement. When Freni Ginwala passed away recently, I just remembered that. And Freni went against the ANC. We're not going to allow power to go from one gang of men to another gang of men and say, now we want our freedom. Organized a quota of ANC women, 3 out of every 10 on the list, to make sure that a big bloc was there, liaising with the National Coalition of Women outside and women from other parties, Sheila Cameron and others, inside Parliament. The most gender-sensitive constitution in the world. No violence from public or private sources in the constitution as a freedom element. Right to make decisions in relation to your body and reproduction in the constitution. The cultural rights, customary law, all subject to the Bill of Rights and equality principles. Religion, again, can't be used to entrench patriarchy in the law of the land, and so on. Why do we have a right to strike in our Constitution, the right to collective bargaining, the right to fair labor practices? Because the workers fought hard. And I would say the biggest crucible of democracy in South Africa in the apartheid days was the trade union movement. Millions of people voting secret ballots for their shop stewards across divisions of language, region, gender, voting, 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 instilling the ideas of democracy and democratic control. So taken together, the constitution we got became the progressive constitution it is. And I stress this because if we don't tell these stories, and there are not so many of us left anymore, that gap is filled with stories about a sordid deal done between Mandela and captains of industry. Our history is being wiped out by our own people. And it's a great history of intelligence and thought and emotion and consensus finding in ways that were principled, giving us the constitution we have. And in spite of all the disappointments, in spite of all the things that make us angry today, and I possibly get more angry than others when I see people I was in the trenches with, and people whom I admired, and people who once upon a time were brave. They weren't always crooks. But somehow power did something to them, behaving in ways that are quite unacceptable. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts. When I read the report of the Zondo Commission, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. And yet part of me says, wow, our government set up the commission. Our Chief Justice sat on the commission. It's not just a few brave journalists. Our people demanded exposure. Our people were vocal. Our people went out into the streets and said, down with corruption. And so the very information about the corruption that hurts so much, in a way, is also a source of pleasure. It's not hidden away. We know these things. And our institutions, in that sense, are working. They're not providing the electricity we need, but they are providing truth. And they are providing people the right to vote. And the Constitution, in that sense, is working. They used to say in the early 1990s, one man, one vote, once. Democracy is not for Africa. We've had 6 general elections, free and fair. When the ANC lost in Johannesburg, incredible. Port Elizabeth, incredible. They stepped down. Our presidents don't stay on for life. To get change, you don't have to have 1 million people in the square, like in Cairo, or tanks in the street, like in Harare. People know if they're president and they're going to be voted out of office in parliament, they step down. So in that sense, our constitution is working. I'm so proud of our courts. I'm not going to be modest about the Constitutional Court. It's a beautiful building in a spectacularly meaningful place in the heart of a prison. And I'm thinking about the judges now, today, not just when I was on the court. Intelligent, thoughtful, well-reasoned judgments. I read the press summaries. It was Richard Goldstone and I insisted on press summaries, and now I'm the beneficiary of that. And I'd say 19 out of 20 I agree with the outcomes. We have a very lively press. We have, for me, something so important. Our biggest growth industry is stand-up comedians. And it says something about our country. And they're from all communities. That we introspect, we laugh, we criticize. If somebody's making notes, I see Tuli's making notes now. Before people making notes, we're going to send notes of my speech to the security police. Now I'm saying something that might be of interest. So we are free. It's not a fair country. It's not a safe country. But it's an open country. And by that I mean the country, the institutions, the way we've fought together to create our democracy, our constitutional democracy. That is what gives me hope. So, okay, I'm going to acknowledge I'm an optimist, maybe an incurable optimist. I believed when it seemed impossible, but not just me alone, with people like Oliver Tambo and Ruth Mampati and Aziz Bahad and Joe Slovo and all the rest, we could get a democratic South Africa. We did, against all the odds. We're not blown up. And I'm in darkness. And I hear a voice saying, Albie, this is Eva Garrido, you're in Maputo Central Hospital. Your arm is in lamentable condition. You must face the future with courage. I feel joyous. That moment the freedom fighter is waiting for, will they come for me? Will they come for me today? Will I be brave? And I got through and I'd only lost an arm. Now, if that isn't the definition of an optimist, what is? I've only lost an arm. And I had the total conviction as I got better, my country would get better. And 2 years later, I was back in South Africa. I have that same feeling today that we've got a country, we've got a people, we've got a constitution, we've got the will, we've got the mechanisms. And we'll find our way through the difficulties we're in. So yes, this is not the society we were fighting for at all. But yes, this is the country we were fighting for, and we must save it and use it to get the society we need.
I'm not sure how to follow that up. So I'm just going to say, please don't stop on my account. So thank you so very much for that, Justice. I think this is definitely the country. and I think this is what I will take from that, is that this is the country. But I think as the people who are of a slightly younger generation, it's incumbent upon us to then build the society. And I think I'll take the plunge and say that I speak for everyone here to say that we'll definitely try to build the society for which you sacrifice so much for. And we owe that to you. So thank you very much for this evening. All right, so the Justice has also kindly agreed to take about 15 minutes of a Q&A, question and answer session. Please may I ask that the people that ask questions professionally, such as myself, as other journalists that are here, that you guys are not allowed to ask questions. I think the judge will maybe give us 30 minutes or so, I think, after the proceedings for any one-on-one questions with the media. So, with that said, here's Justice Albie Sachs. We're going to take a few questions. How do you propose we do it? One question at a time? Or
No,
maybe
take a few questions.
All right. So we'll take a few questions at a time. I'm going to start off on my left, and then I'll come back on my right-hand side. I was told there's a guy called Ruben. Is that you? This is Ruben. Ruben, please can we start with that young lady over there with the glasses, please? Because she was very sprightly in putting her hand up. Ma'am, please could you just give us your name and then ask the question?
Okay.
Oh, sorry. And then just please try and keep it very short because we don't have a lot of time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nose Pure, and I'm a master's student here at Stellenbosch University. And just a bit of context. So higher education institutions in this country have provided fertile ground for mobilization and organization, and obviously with the contributions of the working class in making sure that we're to the point where we have democracy and change in this country. So how do we reconcile with the current problems that we're facing in higher education institutions where students have lack of access to education? Just on a social justice level, how do we reconcile with that in cultivating leaders that are educated, that are informed, and that are aware?
Cool, thank you.
Just help me with that.
All right. Cool. I saw your hand. There was one hand at the back there for me, please, Ruben, and then we'll come to the front. I did see you, bro. I did see you.
Hello, I'm Nomfune Kolukola, final year student here at Stellenbosch. As Mr. Justice mentioned, most of the battles in the past were fought with weapons, but our battles today are different than that. So how do we fight for this society that is our responsibility to basically fight? How do we fight for it? How do we, without using weapons?
All right, and then I've got one here. Cool, and then I think we'll take these three from this side and then
Good day, Judge Sachs, Banzi Bottoman here, SRC member, and I'm also a legal scholar and an activist myself. So as I stand here awaiting a very wonderful reception outside, many students in this university still remain without accommodation. And the student community is desensitized from the situation, and it is not of priority to most. So my question to you is that, do you believe that legal scholars, centers for social justice, like the one hosting this event today, and most legal academics are fighting enough, like you fought in your legal capacity, for the society that you believe we should still have?
All right, so we'll take those three responses from the judge now, and then we'll come to my right.
I'm going to comment on your reference a couple of times to the sacrifices I made.
That's fine.
I didn't make sacrifices. I didn't make sacrifices at all. If I had gone along with the benefits of white society and become a lawyer, making a lot of money, driving a fancy car, getting my picture for nice reasons in the local newspaper and so on, that would have been a sacrifice. I would have been sacrificing my soul, my heart, my spirit, the meaning of life, everything I'd grown up with. As a little kid, little picky, age 5, my younger brother, age 4, my mom, Ray, would say, tidy up, Uncle Moses is coming. Uncle Moses wasn't Moses Cantor, he was Moses Kutani. And my mother was the typist for Moses Kutani, and he used to joke. He was the General Secretary of the Communist Party. And he said, Ray taught me to read and write in a night school, and now I'm her boss. And what a privilege it was for me to grow up in a world where it was natural for my mother to have huge respect for a black leader. I didn't have to go through all the somersaults of fighting racism. That was the natural world. The world outside was unnatural and wrong. My dad, Solly Sachs, General Secretary of the Garment Workers Union. Lillian Ngoyi, you always hear about her, August the 9th, shop steward. Rosie Jardine, shop steward. Helen Joseph on the medical aid. Johanna Cornelius, Betty de Toy, Garment Workers Union. And when I came up there, they always made a fuss of the General Secretary's children, mainly at that stage, white Afrikaans women, very progressive, full of energy and fun. That was the world I grew up in. That was a world that was, in a way, anticipating a future South Africa. If I had turned my back on them, that would have been a sacrifice. And joining the struggle, it was so liberating for me as a human being. It enlarged my vision, generally. To be called comrade, it was beautiful. You're a human being through comradeship, associating with people, sharing danger and hardship, the closeness. But also I learned to get out of my skin, my tight white skin, and to move and to sing. And I learned the little beautiful rhythms of African discourse and interaction. And this was liberating for me. I wasn't fighting for the black people. I was fighting for me, for my right to be a free human being. The only way I could get my rights to be a free person in my country was joining the struggle led by African people, joining that. It was all liberatory for me. So it wasn't a sacrifice at all. And even losing my arm, so many of our people, they lost years of their lives. You can't see it. I get a lot of sympathy because you can see it. I even got the Clooney Awards, and the awards named after me. Why? Because the little statuette shows a lawyer who sacrificed. You can see it. It could have been the Nelson Awards. It could have been the Oliver Awards. It could have been the Griffiths Awards. It could have been the Victoria Awards or the Ishmael Awards or the Brahma Awards. It's the Albie Awards. Why? Because people can see the trauma that I suffered. Even my going to jail, the jail diary of Albie Sachs, which I wrote afterwards, turning the negative into positive, a book. I'd always wanted to write a book. Now I had a chance to write a book. And it's made into a play, and it's put on by the Royal Shakespeare Company, it's broadcast on TV. Well, that's not sacrifice. That's great. Soft Vengeance of a Freedom Fighter. my being blown up, losing an arm, I write a book. And it's years later read by a certain Vanessa September who falls in love with the narrator, and she wants to know, does the real Albie Sachs measure up? And I think 20 odd years later, she's still not quite sure if the real Albie measures up to the narrator. And I mention this to say the things that are presented as sacrifice, in fact, were part and parcel of a very vivid and a very wonderful, very ebullient life. And so the optimism in that sense is part and parcel of that. The optimism of the oppressed people that one day the world will be better. And we always had humor, even in the darkest days, even in prison. Lots and lots of humor and spirit and positive energies. So that's on the main response I wanted to give. In terms of the specific questions put to me, when I dropped out of politics in 1994 to become a judge, I said, bye-bye, world of politics, contestation, arguments, and so on, and I entered the bubble. It's actually a wonderful bubble. The bubble of the Constitution, the Constitutional Court, the ideals for which we'd fought. I wasn't abandoning my ideals. I was carrying on the ideals in a new kind of a setting. But for better or for worse, it means I can't answer some of these questions. They're political questions. They're questions that might go to court and might have to be heard by my colleagues. So all I can say is that there are a lot of wonderful lawyers in this country, in the Legal Resources Center, in community law, at UWC, in different bodies at different universities, working on the environment, working on rights for women, working on land rights, housing rights in Tafuna and so on. They're doing terrific work, and they are brilliant. So it's not as though there aren't lawyers there who are interested. But if you are having problems with maybe somebody else sitting in this room here at Stellenbosch University, don't try and get me on your side. Because I'm not going to be involved.
Okay, we are out of time, but I did promise, Prof, you don't mind if we take one? I did promise that we'll come to this side of the room. Let us start from the back. There are 4 questions on this side. Now there's 5. Guys, we honestly, we don't have time, so we can't unfortunately take everybody. So please bear with me.
Thank you very much. My name is Fiso Zungu. Justice, I think I must differ with you. 1, Chief Justice Zondo.
Please, if you could ask a question. As I was saying, we don't have time. So I beg of you, my brother, if you're not going to ask a question, please can we hold the comment to later?
Okay. No, Justice, because you said at the age of 17 years old, you were saying, Africa maibuye. Do you think Africa is back today? If it's back, how is it? What does it mean to be in Africa today? Thank you.
Yes, we're gonna take 2 more questions on this side. That lady that's standing up, and then the one with the hat. Yeah, and then. Yes,
Good evening. My name is Claire Rankin. I'm also a student in the law faculty. What I wanted to ask was, since the adoption of the Constitution, since the advent of democracy in South Africa, what development do you see as having the most potential to assist our generation in what is now the fight for the society that we have been talking about? in this lecture.
Okay, and then one last question, this lady with the hat over here, and then, hade bra, hade nod.
Okay. Thank you very much. My
Thank
name is Tandi Makubela. I would like to ask the judge about the fairness of the court as in section 35. I must mention that I'm an old lady who just completed LLB, so I do have
Yeah, so the fairness of the court, right?
Yes, the fairness of the court.
Yeah,
Because
and
we've
then-
got a right to a fair trial.
Yeah.
So what was the experience of the judge when he was still practicing, actively involved? Did he find that there were cases which were not fair generally, or there were no fairness of the trial? And the last one.
No, sorry, just one, ma'am, I'm sorry. All right, thank you so much. All right. So basically just the fairness of when you were practicing, when you were still in court, did you find that the court acted I'm not sure you will be able to answer that. All right. All right. We'll allow those three questions. Sorry, gents, I can't, honestly, time. All right, Justice?
Yes, well, I'll start with the last one. I practiced as an advocate it was then called the Supreme Court of South Africa, Cape of Good Hope Provincial Division in Cape Town, where the High Court is now, from 1957, January 1957, until 1966. When people ask me for legal advice today, I say, if you want to know what the law was in 1966, I can tell you very, very well. I'm not in touch now. But practicing in those courts was agonizing. We had some decent judges. Judge Herbstein in Cape Court never passed a death sentence, struck down regulations, used what little space was available to protect the rights of the people. We had another judge, I won't mention his name, he would sentence 6 people a year to death. It was nothing to him. Young advocates, my first case, aged, I'm just 21, turning 22, was a murder case, possible death sentence. The idea was nobody should be hanged if they hadn't had a legal defense. And young advocates, there was no pupillage in those days, should get experience. So the judges would appoint us to defend people on murder cases. It was agonizing, it was awful. And what mattered was race. Black on black, death, no death sentence. White on white, no death sentence. White on black, no death sentence. Black on white, and we used a horrible word called a swinger, hanging. It was a swinger. We just knew that. The other thing is, who was the judge? People's lives depended on that. There were other parts that were agonizing. The judge is speaking to a witness and saying, yes, Mrs. Smith, yes, Van Deventer, yes, Rosie. Rosie's an African woman. Now, I want to question Mrs. Shabalala, but I can't say, Mrs. Shabalala, what do you think? Because then I'm taking on the judge. My client's going to suffer. You have to do mental gymnastics all the time not to be trapped by the racist language. White judges, white police officers, white prosecutors, and black accused. And yet, there was some space sometimes to prevent death sentences, to expose torture, and we were glad when progressive-minded people sat as judges because they could mitigate. Some people said, no, progressive whites shouldn't sit on the bench, they're only giving legitimacy. That was a very professorial, abstract notion. The people in the prison cells wanted the Didcots. and they wanted the Laurie Ackermans, and they wanted the Goldstones to be there because it would be a way of softening the impact. And they turned out to be wonderful judges on the new Constitutional Court. I loved it and I hated it. I loved the cut and thrust. I loved striding into court, that excitement, adrenaline, cross-examining, arguing, debating, and I hated it because of the atmosphere, the ambience it was in. But that was a long, long, long time ago. Now, the right to a fair trial. In my own case, I was thrown into prison without a warrant of arrest, without going to court, without having lawyers, without being having a trial at all. The first time and the second time, the addition of sleep deprivation, torture, banging, shouting for 20 minutes, banging the table, then silence for 20 minutes. I collapsed the next morning, water poured on me, and so on. So detention without trial was horrible in those days. There's a clause in our Constitution now that says no detention without trial. I put it there initially, and it was kept afterwards, because that was the basis of destroying a fair trial, and meant in effect the security police decided on guilt, and the judges sometimes could be little more than a rubber stamp, but not much more than that. And so now we have a fair trial, and we pay a price for it. Trials are dragged on and on and on. People who've behaved abominably are using the rule of law to spin out, to spin out, to spin out. But I'd rather have that than have the detention without trial, to have the torture, to have the violence that we had before. Violence. We grew up in our youth movement, non-violent struggle in South Africa. Violence favored the state. They had the guns. We must have popular mobilization. But after a decade of non-violent struggle, like the Defiance Campaign, conditions for the people were worse than they had been. And leaders were imprisoned, and there were massacres, and no expansion of the vote, no opening up of things, just Bantustan leaders, repression, and so on. So we went in for armed struggle. I supported the armed struggle. I'm a pacifist at heart. There was just no other way. We had to introduce guns, explosives, and so on to hit back and to give the people a sense of confidence that we can hit back. When I landed in Mozambique in 1976, after having taught the University of Dar es Salaam, and I saw a soldier at the airport, and it had liberated zone of humanity, and there was a black soldier with a gun. I felt fantastic. A gun on our side. A gun on the side of freedom, not a gun pointed at the people. But 11 years later, when I'm wheeled out after I've been blown up, after Mozambique had been in a bitter civil war, with hundreds of thousands of deaths, millions of refugees, child soldiers, landmines blowing off legs. No more guns, no more guns, no more guns, no more guns. And for many of us, we were in that sense converted to multi-party democracy, a Bill of Rights, an open society, by the experience in Mozambique People's Power. It seemed first fantastic, uniting everybody to bring about change in favor of the poor, the oppressed. But if there's no space for opposition, it doesn't go away. It goes underground, it gets picked up, it becomes part of the Cold War and devastation. So it's taken long, long, long time in South Africa, but better take long, long, long time than what happened in Mozambique. I truly believe that. It had an enormous impact on my thinking. It does take long. My buoy Africa hasn't come back, but it's coming back. It's coming into this room. It's coming into the discourse. It's in our Constitution. It's in our Constitutional Court building, built right in the heart of the old prison, representing the traditional way of justice under a tree, of participation, of openness, of feeling for humanity, of bringing everybody in. So Africa hasn't come back, but it is coming back, and it's got to come back more. And it's going to come back not by going back to pre-conquest forms of social structure and organization, but by African people taking from the world things that enable them to express themselves as Africans with more energy and thrust and conviction and ability, without the patriarchy of the structures, traditional structures that was holding back the society. That's the way I feel. By Boy Africa, Africa come back. That was my very first slogan. In a funny way, you come back to your first slogan, my boy Africa, and I'm not born black African into the African culture, but my whole life has been one of immersion in a struggle led by African people, enlarging my mentality, enlarging my humanity. So, can I say it? My boy, yeah!
Africa!
Africa!
My
Africa hasn't come back into this room yet.
All right. Thank you so much, Justice. I'm sure we can sit and just worship at the Justice's feet all night. But, some people do have homes that they must go to, and ESCOM is going to load shed, so, we will need to move on. So we're almost at the end of tonight's program. I just quickly want to make one or two announcements before I call up Professor Thuli Madonsela for the vote of thanks. If I could please ask, obviously, Professor de Villiers, Professor Pinar, as well as Professor Madonsela and you, Justice, if you don't mind afterwards to take a group picture, please. We do need a souvenir of tonight. And then the other one is the media guys that have got questions. If you are still in the room, please do stay behind, and then we can facilitate your one-on-ones. And then afterwards, after the vote of thanks, there will be a music item, and then there will be a reception then for some of you guys in terms of the refreshments, which will be in the quad. So for the last time tonight, please allow me to call Professor Thuli Madonsela, who is the Director for the Center for Social Justice, to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Lekanya. Greetings to all of you. You are all our esteemed guests. And also a special greeting to all of the leaders is acknowledged properly by our peerless Program Director, Lukhanyo Galata. And of course, a special greeting to our guest of honor, who is a quintessential storyteller. And I do agree with you, Lukhanyo, that you could sit for the whole night and listen to him without really getting tired. And hopefully, we will bring you back to tell more stories to our students. Listening to Justice Sachs and to our own Vice-Chancellor, Wim de Villiers, the Acting Dean, Prof. Janita Pinar, and Lukhanyo Galata, reminded me of a story that touched my heart. It was about an athlete who was on the verge of winning a race. But just before he reached the finishing line, maybe about 30 seconds before, he had resigned himself to being the second best, because there was an athlete ahead of him who was clearly going to win. Those of you who run, I know the Vice Chancellor Provim runs a bit. I don't know who else runs. But those who run will tell you that 32nd is a lifetime in athletics. So this athlete B could have won the race if he had seized the moment, because the one who was about to win didn't touch the rope, which was a technical requirement. Just as he reached the rope, he started celebrating because he didn't know the rules, coming from a different place. So athlete B, instead of seizing the moment and celebrating the glory and possibly the money that would come from it, he went to the first athlete, pushed him to touch the rope, and settled for second best. You ask yourself, as Justice Albie was asked, was it a sacrifice? And he said the sacrifice would have been to settle for a life of being burdened with being part of wrongfulness and benefiting from it. These are the leaders that have made that decision, that they will create a society of true excellence, where a technical advantage doesn't give you an advantage over a fellow human being, where the playing field is truly level and fair. We thank you, Justice Albie Sachs. We thank you, Prof. Vim de Villiers. We thank you, Lucanio Galata. We thank you, Prof. Pinar. Lucanio says you didn't do much. Everyone who has an education has a better job, has an option to settle for their comfortable middle-class life. In fact, when you finish Justice Sachs, I thought about words from William Wilberforce when he spoke to the British Parliament in 1791. And he said words to the effect that now that you've heard the truth, you can look the other way if you choose, but none of you can say you did not know. So you've made us aware that, yes, we got the country you fought for, but not the society you fought for. And you made us aware, though, that what you fought for was a constitution and democracy that enables everyone in this room and beyond to earn the other freedoms for themselves and for others. And when you spoke, it reminded me of Nelson Mandela, who gets accused for wrongs he never committed. He always said that all we got was freedom to work for the other freedoms. And you confirmed that today. And I think, Lukhanya, you are working for those freedoms. I don't know, those who arrived early, you may have watched a video from Lukhanya Galata. If you didn't, we'll send you a connection. It's only a 17 minutes video, but it just pretty much summarizes the same message. And Lukhanya Galata comes from struggle as Justice Sachs, who comes from the Sachs family. In Lukhanya's case, the father was killed, the Craddock Four. And he could ride on that crest and get society to worship the ground he works on and be a celebrity as for Galata's son, but he chooses to still expand the frontiers of freedom for everyone. Because according to Justice Sachs, if we don't do so, we all remain in a prison. So thank you, Justice Sachs, for an amazing speech. I knew that your speech was going to be exceptional. But I'm unable to find words to express my sense of awe and gratitude for your amazing lecture today. But on behalf of everyone else, I also want to thank you for what you've done for the country since the age of 6. Even though your father said he wants you to be a soldier of the liberation struggle, you could have chosen something else. After losing your eye, or your sight, partial sight, and your arm, you could have hanged on to that. You probably would be Lord Sachs by now. If you had gone to England, the anti-apartheid movement would have really opened its arms to you. You chose to stay here. And right now, Justice Sachs is over 85 and still concerned that the society we were fighting for needs midwives, and he's still one of those midwives. And he's given us an idea now on how can we join him as midwives. But I believe that by being in this room already, you already are midwives. Something in you got you to come here. You could have been in 1,000 places, but you care about the society that he cared for at the age of 17. So thank you, Justice Sachs. I would also like to thank our Vice-Chancellor Wim de Villiers, who's also the chairperson or co-chairperson of the Council of Social Justice Champions, that has championed the Musa Plan for Social Justice. And to both of you, I would say, in Ubuntu we say, you are Abantu. You see, in Ubuntu, when I say you are Umuntu, that's a whole thesis. It's not a word. It's very loaded. You are Umuntu, and you are Umuntu. What does it mean? In Ubuntu, it basically means that the process of turning you into a proper human being through socialization has been a successful process. You are respectful, you respect yourself, you respect others, you're constructive, you are kind, you're everything. Often Ubuntu is reduced to the humane part of it. No, that's just one dimension of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a philosophy like all other philosophies. But when you say you are Umuntu, you are what the Hellenic philosophers would say, you are a person of virtue. And I think you are Ubuntu, and I think and to our Vice Chancellor, I also think you are Ubuntu. Yes. And thank you for being Ubuntu. Ubuntu doesn't mean you're a particular color, it just means you're a proper human. In other words, you're not just a two-legged thing, you are a proper human. And, right. Well, to our Vice Chancellor, I'm not just thanking you for this event, I'm also thanking you for the leadership of the chair and for also just pursuing the vision. In government or in organizations, often everyone wants to start their own legacy. Prof. Vim was not the one who established the chair, or he established the chair, but it was an idea conceived before him. But in this world where everyone celebrates launching their own thing, people don't often consolidate and build something. But also, I just think for Prof. Vim, we have to just recognize that Ubuntu, which drives the restitution statement. How many institutions do you know that have a restitution statement? I don't know many. And part of the problem is because people have a sense of shame, but nobody in this room created the mess that Justice Albie Sachs found himself fighting for at the age of 17. But you must agree with me, it's our mess now. And if we don't fix it, it will mess with us. So these leaders have the audacity to see possibility. To borrow from the Swedish ambassador, I see you pioneering possibility. I see our VC pioneering possibility, particularly on the difficult issue of restitution. We all want to talk nicely about democracy, anti-discrimination, etc. But reparation, fixing, rebalancing, it's a very difficult issue. And what I have written here is that I do know that you don't have the answers, Prof. But that also shows courage to have a picture of a future that you really don't have clarity on, but to have the audacity to say, walk with me to that future. Because if you want a world where truly the athlete that touches that finishing line does so based on merit, then you have to create a world that our Constitution says we must create. One that is based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights, where everyone's potential is freed and everyone's life is improved. Everyone's life. It doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter what color they are, everyone's life is improved. And often politicians think every black person's life should be improved. No, class matters too. For example, white poverty as opposed to African poverty is at 1%. Among Africans, it's 64.2. But go to Coronation Park and say to those people, oh, you're only 1%. To themselves, they're not 1%. To themselves, they're humans too. So when we're talking about building this better South Africa, it's for everyone. It should be a world of opportunity for every person purely because they're human. But to arrive there, we'll have to do some rebalancing. And Justice Sachs is saying, we don't have to wait for the law. We don't have to wait to be coerced. We can do some of it in our own little spaces. And I know lots of students and lots of humans in this room that are doing just that. Just from Clover Makwota, giving us whatever you gave us, it's not a lot, but every rand makes a difference. We have a social justice conference every year, and people enjoy that. They eat, they sleep for free, and all that comes from the Becker Foundation for free. But I'm standing here, somebody pays for this chair, somebody pays for the social justice team. It is the Law Trust in Social Justice, represented here by, I hope, Michael Leroux, I saw you, sir, with your lovely wife. Thank you. And I don't know if Chris Otto is here. So that's making a difference, because Praveen was talking about the fact that we are here to cultivate social justice consciousness, design thinking for those in government, to stop designing one size fits all, because that's how you leave people behind. We're only able to do that because we paid to think, write, and talk. We're the luckiest humans on earth, isn't it? Just being paid to think, write, and talk. Well, read, think, write, and talk. Because they're paying, and thank you to the chair, to the Law Trust, and then to DVC, Duresh Ramjuganath. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for the support from the Rectorate, together with Prof. Sibusiso Moya. Thank you. You hit the ground running last year to come and help us to launch the center. To Prof. Renal Retief, always there, always supporting, including during our social justice walk, including when we walk for action for inclusion. Thank you, ma'am. We really appreciate it. Chris Otto, I've already mentioned. Dean Juanita Pinar, thank you for always being there. Even when Prof. Nicola is there, you're always there supporting. And thank you for your amazing welcome this morning. Well, this evening. And to many of our guests who are here, I would like to thank the youngest chief of the Royal Bafokeng, Dr. Koketsu Rakudu. Thank you for coming all the way from Northwest to come and honor social justice quest. Your mother, or grandmother, Mama Khulu, was a great advocate for peace. And you will remember from even the time of somebody like Plato, it was always understood that if we want a peaceful society, we have to invest in justice. And thank you for being there too. Minister Shama Fernandez, Department of Social Development, Western Cape Government, we come a long way, ma'am. Thank you for understanding that if you want to make progress on corruption, you have to make progress on social justice too. Because it's very easy for people to love the corrupt if they give them crumbs, than to love us if we only talk about anti-corruption, but we don't care about freedom from want. To Councillor Patricia Crowley, representing the mayor, thank you, ma'am. The mayor and her team, you're always very supportive of us, and we're very grateful for that. To my friend and colleague, Louise van Rijn, there's an unsung hero of this country when it comes to social justice. She is on the trench, Partners for Possibility, not waiting for government to fix schools. She's already fixed more than 1,500 schools as we speak. Thank you, and thank you for being here. to Thank you. To Akona, who's just helped me with my glasses. Thank you for the support. And of course, we thank all of the members of the Social Justice Champions Council. One of them is Mem Basitsa Nakumalo, who's joining us online. And this Council of Leaders includes luminaries such as John Gani, Kate Robertson, Felicia Mabuza Sattel, Ashraf Garda, etc. On my thank you list, the main organizer of this event, who led this project and coordinated this lecture with amazing agility and resilience, is Ms. Diane Kahiza. Thank you, Diane. Then there's a member of this team who's always there, always doing what must be done without asking for permission. And he was central to the success of this event and for the sponsorship from Kluwer Makota. That's Themba Seisa. SU Events team, led by Christelle Peterson and Amira Brown, you were amazing. Look at this beautiful crowd. Thank you. And then the technical team from Creative Gear, thank you. And of course, we thank the entire social justice team, led by our colleague who couldn't make it tonight. She's not feeling well, Marna Lawrence, and everyone else who rallied around her. And from the Dean's Office, we're grateful to Yolandi. Right. And we're also grateful to the Law Faculty's Background Support Team, including Ruben, that you have seen helping us right now. And for the catering, food catering, we thank Paul from Cooper Kettle. And we also want to thank the media for the support we have received. Apart from our colleague Lucanio Kalata, we have received support from ENCA, SABC, Newsroom Africa, Power FM, Cape Radio, City Press, and the Citizen Maverick. And of course, last but not least, we are exceedingly grateful to Lucanio Kalata for curating this event amazingly, and for the work you do, say, in your own space. I've already thanked Kluwer Makota, but just to be sure, our Vice Dean is part of that, Professor Stevens. Thank you to the directors of Kluwer Makota. We really appreciate it. And then lastly, to everyone in this room, although we're a research institution that is seeking to harvest social justice research for innovation, training, and social engagement, we rely primarily on social capital in broader society. And we thank you for just answering the call to come and listen to one of the greatest South Africans, Justice Sachs. Who's not just the greatest South African, George Clooney and Amal Clooney have also recognized him as one of the greatest human beings on earth. So thank you for coming to share this moment with us. Your presence here reminds us of the fact that it doesn't just take a village to raise a child, it takes a village to do remarkable things. And we trust that as we pursue other initiatives on social justice, such as Action for Inclusion, Bridge the Gap, etc., you will be there with us, if not physically, in spirit, because we know you'll be covering ground wherever you are. So as we conclude, Justice Albie, I believe, like you, no one in this room wants to live in an unjust society. A lot of people have done that experiment using the John Rawls method of a veil of ignorance. They found that even monkeys don't want to live in an unjust society. And one experiment that is discussed by Kate Robertson in the book Making a Difference, it comes from Bob Geldof. It's an experiment where they had two monkeys doing the same job, but monkey A didn't know there was monkey B. Monkey A was being rewarded with cucumbers. And monkey A didn't know that there was B, and that B was being rewarded any differently. And then eventually, they lifted the veil, and monkey A could see that there's monkey B. Then they performed the same task. When they finished, the person doing the experiment rewarded monkey B first and gave them grapes. This kind of monkey loves grapes. So seemingly monkey A thought, oh my God, our reward has changed. We're getting a better reward today. So it started salivating, expecting grapes. And guess what it got? Cucumbers. It got angry, threw the cucumbers away, and stopped cooperating. So John Rawls tells us that justice is fairness to all. If you want a society that is stable, then the fruits of mutual cooperation should be shared fairly. So we know in the past that was not so. We know currently the Constitution is different. But it's hard. Even John Rawls doesn't get it right, because he only deals with compensating for the fact that some people are born disabled and others are born rich, whilst others are born poor. So he deals with the redistribution part, but he doesn't deal with what Prof. Wim has made himself and his institution vulnerable for, to add restitution. There are no clear answers on that. We play a game with the rigged Monopoly game. It's very easy. It's a game you can reset. But with society, we can't. But, sir, you have told us that we do have the keys in the Constitution. So what it will take is willingness and creativity. But not just for South Africa, for the whole world. Because if we don't deal with the persisting disparities that are unfair and unjust, we'll never know peace. Thank you.
I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die, to die, to die, to die.